Hello, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Last week I had showed the Arteza watercolor pencils in a first impressions video, so now I'm back using them on a card. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to be using. I've got the Arteza watercolor pencils, as I said, and I'm also going to use this adorable Art Impressions stamp set. I don't know if it's available anywhere, but if I can find it, I will definitely link it. But to start, I'm going to take my wonky stitched circle dies from My Favorite Things. I'm going to cut out a couple of circles using those papers that I have there on my desk. And I've cut down some of that Arteza watercolor paper. That's the expert level. I've showed that before and I really, really like it. So I cut some of that down. I'm going to put that into my Mini Misti and I'm going to stamp out my image. And to do this, because I'm using watercolor pencils, I'm going to want a watercolor or waterproof ink. And so I'm using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. That is definitely waterproof. And so I'm going to stamp that out a couple times because this paper does have a little bit of texture to it. And so I want to make sure I have a good impression. Now that ink will stay wet a little bit, so I am drying that with my heat tool, and I'm just showing you the stamp set here because I'm going to use that color palette to color my actual image. So I'm pulling out my pencils and I'm using my swatches. This is another reason why I like swatches so much. I can see exactly what color I am wanting to use, and so I will grab that up and take my paper to that and see if I can find a good match. And when I'm happy with the colors that I've picked, I will start coloring. To start, I did use this flesh colored pencil, and I didn't do a great job of putting it down. I thought I would see if I could really pull that the ink out, and I wasn't really able to. So with the watercolor pencils, one of the things you're just going to want to do is just color, almost like you would in a coloring book, I suppose. And then what you do is you go back over it with your water brush or your paintbrush or whatever it is you're using. You go over that and then you make it look like watercolor. So that, I mean, you can occasionally pull the color out a little bit, as you can see what I'm doing here, but mostly you'll just want to put your color down, and where you want it darker, you'll just put a little more pressure, and where you want it lighter, you will just use a little less pressure. And as I said, I'm using the guide. One of the neat things about Art Impressions stamps is that they usually have a pretty good guide of how they have them colored, and they're really easy to follow. So that's what I did. I didn't have the exact color matches, but I found something similar. And I'm taking a couple different colored pencils here, watercolor pencils, and I am blending those together. And I really like the way that looks. I'm using the Arteza water brushes as well. I really like these because they do force me to, because there's a button on them. So I'm pretty heavy-handed usually. I've said this before. When I'm watercoloring or just using anything, I tend to hold my pencils very tightly, and when you're using a water brush, that can be a bit of a problem simply because, you know, the way you get the water out is by squeezing. But with those particular water brushes, the button is a little bit higher up than where I actually hold, so in order to get that water out, I have to press up on the buttons. And so I really like the way that ends up working out for me. And so I'll have everything that I'm using linked down below. Originally, I had started out using my Escoda water brushes. Those are just some really nice paint brushes that I had gotten for my birthday from my husband. But for this particular medium, I decided that the water brushes themselves were a much better fit. So that's why I went back to that. And sorry that my camera keeps kind of going in and out. It's trying to focus on the water brush and then my coloring. Just can't decide what it wants to do. So like I said, what you'll want to do with watercolor pencils is you want to just color the whole thing. You can drag some of that color out, but your best bet is to just color. You will see here on the bag that I do use, or I leave a bit of a white space in certain areas, and then I come in with this darker color and I put that where I think my shadows might be, and then I'll take my water brush and I'll just blend that out. And where I have the lighter color, or maybe I didn't put as much color down, that's where my white spots are going to be, or my lightest shades, which is nice because then you will see that there is definitely a variation in the color, and that does give you some of the shadowing. If I wanted to go back over it with the colored pencils, I could do that, but I have better luck waiting for the watercolor to dry. So sometimes you can bring a heat tool to that, and then if you want to add more color, just go ahead and add more color. And now that I'm done coloring, I'm going to fussy cut this out. I don't have a die for this. I don't even think they make one. And so I want this cut out with a small white border. I decided to make a gatefold card, so I've put this into my Score Buddy, and I'm taking this lavender paper that I have, and I'm scoring it at 2 1/8 inch on each side, and then I will fold that in and use my bone folder to make sure that that is nice and crisp. And then I'll start stacking up my actual images. So I'll stack that blue on top of the craft, and then I'll use some foam tape on the back of my image, and then I'll just put her down. For my background, I felt like that purple just needed a little something more. So this is where I pull out my Arteza glitters. And I've showed these in a recent video as well, and I love these. So if you haven't seen that video, make sure and head back and take a look at these glitters because they are fantastic. There's so many colors in this set. The color I'm actually using is called Grape Purple. You cannot buy them separately. You have to buy them in the set, but the set is so inexpensive. It's just absolutely worth it, and there's so much glitter in each one. And I love how the little pots are. I used my glass mat to kind of make sure that my score tape was lined up pretty decently, and then I'm just trimming off the excess with some Tim Holtz scissors, and then I will peel off that score tape backing paper, the release paper, which will expose that adhesive. And this is one way that you can get your glitter to stick to where you want it. So I've just made some stripes on there, and like what I was saying is about the pots is so there's two edges. There's one where you can sprinkle and one where you can pour, and I opened up the pour end. And what you'll want to do after you're done putting your glitter down is just grab like a piece of scratch paper, copy paper, and a bone folder and burnish that glitter in there. Tap that over your garbage can just to get the excess off. Burnish it once again, and you're really not going to have a lot of flyaways at that point. So I'll show you again. I'll peel off all of my release paper on that score tape. And once again, that was just the 1/8 inch. And then I'll just pour my glitter right over the top. Dump that into a coffee filter. That's the easiest way that I have found to use these glitters. And then grab that scratch paper once again, take my bone folder to burnish the glitter in there, and then tap off all the excess over a garbage can, and then you're good to go. I'll show you how I put the glitter back. So these pots are a little bit, they're thin, but this is where the coffee filters come in super, super handy. And this is nothing new. I know people have shown this before, but then you can just dump that in there, and I make sure I use that copy paper again, and anything extra that I have that I couldn't get in there, I just dump that over into the garbage. For my main image, because this is a gatefold card, you don't want to adhere both edges because you just close the card up and that, defeats the purpose. So I'm using some foam tape on the side, just the one side. This is going to be the left-hand side of the image, and I'll peel off all that backing paper and center that down and stick it down, and there you can see that at least the card still opens up. For my sentiment, I've just grabbed some white cardstock that I have. I'm going to stamp that down with some detail ink from Brutus Monroe, and I'll adhere that down with some liquid glue. And then I decide I do want to do a little stamping on the inside. So I take that same image that I have on the outside, and I'm going to cover that with this Abergene Surface ink from Brutus Monroe because it matches that purple nicely. And then I will also stamp a sentiment on the inside using the detail ink, the Raven Detail ink from Brutus Monroe again as well. And then that's going to finish off this card. So if you liked this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. All of the items that I used today are going to be listed down in the description box below. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down in the comment section. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by.